invite Deepti to talk about the work with Dvara and regulatory approaches.
Hi. So I think what Karthik has described is really how could we, what is an reimagined state of affairs for tackling, I would say, financial fraud. And so here, what we're trying, why is this?
You just have to press the next one.
No, I'm just wondering. And so this is really an attempt at what might be some of the design features of that kind of an attempt, right? So because I think we've already discussed what the data is showing, and Amrita talked about what was found from her field work. I'll just very quickly summarize what the state, what is our current status, right? And while and sort of all of this work was in relation to UPI, but I think suffice to say a lot of it is still applicable to non-UPI payments platforms. So one is that we know from the demand side that a lot of users don't have comprehension, right, of the fact that they're being defrauded. Second is that we have, and at least I think here there are a lot of changes that are happening, a lot of measures are being taken from the governments and the various ministries side, which is the point around onboarding and authorization, right? A lot of the issues that, for example, we see in UPI is because of compromised Aadhaar, compromised SIM cards, and maybe even compromised bank accounts. And that is in a way trickling into UPI as an ecosystem, and it's not right to say that all of this is because of UPI, but rather that there are many other components to the overall system which may have been compromised, and that's what we are ending up with in terms of just more than 50% of financial fraud in India is now in a way linked to the UPI ecosystem, right, in some way or the other. Quickly going to reporting and investigation, today's awareness campaigns, and I think yesterday somebody had raised this, do not talk about what do I need to do if I have been defrauded, right? It's all about prevention. What can you know, looking out for those instances where you might be getting defrauded. Reporting channels are fragmented. I think Karthik alluded to this a little bit. And so the various databases are therefore siloed. So what do we do about it? The disproportionate enforcement action, which is really that for the most part, the only action that the law enforcement has is to freeze the account, right? And so we have all these anecdotal stories about accounts being frozen of innocuous sort of individuals who were in fact not part of they were not actually perpetrating any crime, but that's really the. So I won't go into a lot of the updations that are happening, many of the developments that are happening on the side of the law enforcement plus the Department of Telecommunications, the Ministry of Home Affairs. But suffice to say that there is a lot of activity there over the past 3-4 years. So what we actually put out is a report. Do take a look. It's called Curbing Scams in UPI. It's a white paper that we did along with the Data Security Council of India. Today I will only talk about two parts, right? One is a blueprint for a comprehensive frauds reporting and management system, and the second is a liability framework and compensation, right? Could we imagine what a liability model might look like and what a compensation for victims might look like, right? Before I kind of get into both of these things, I just wanted to state that today we know that there is a zero liability or limited liability framework for transactions that you did not authorize. So these are unauthorized transactions. So you can get the entire money back. Somebody else has to pay for it, which is really the banking system. But what we've tried to do is we've introduced a newer category, which is called the authorized but unintentional transaction, right? Which is that I intended to do this transaction on my own volition, but not knowing that had I known that this is not the party that I'm transacting with, I would not do it. So that's what I call APU. And then we got feedback from stakeholders that we need to have something called an AAI, which is authorized and intentional. So these are cases where, for example, my maid, her debit card is being used by the son without her permission, right? And then he goes and does transactions. That necessarily will not come into this. So what you heard is there are significant transactions where this is happening and people are not aware that that's actually what happened. So I'll just get straight into the design of the management system, right? The fraud reporting and management system. So I think what we've tried to do is, having gotten a lot of inputs from various stakeholders, we thought that okay, you know, there is a need for some kind of a unified system, not necessarily a database. But what must it do, right? So one is that there has to be significant back-end coordination between different reporting channels. And when I say back-end coordination, who are these reporting channels, right? So you have the NCRP, you have the 1930, which is the helpline call, the call line which goes into the NCRP. This is all sitting under the I4C, which is the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. But the RBI has another database. The NPCI has another database. The DOT has another database. So how do we make sure that there is significant interaction between them? And second is that what's the nature of, we need a small set of data points which can be collected across all channels through which consumers can in fact report. And what could these be? We've kind of mapped out some of these. Even if individual databases may in fact collect a whole bunch of additional information. And I'll tell you why we need this. And then the third is that this platform should be able to, should be an intelligence generating platform. And we need an ability to do sort of risk triangulation as well as a kind of attempt at applying proportionality, right, to the nature of enforcement that is required. So what is the action? Is it freezing of accounts or is it something else? So we are in fact proposed a bunch of other ideas that can be considered and such that the system in fact keeps updating based on new information that comes in and saying this should be the nature of the action and who should be that entity who should take that action, right? And that should get dynamically updated. So yeah, so I would just say don't get bogged down by this, but the idea is that user interacts with a fraudster, may or may not lose money, wants to report, so they can report it via different channels. So really, today it's not fully possible, but we do want to imagine a system where you can report it to 1930, you could report it to your bank. It could be offline, IVR, online, branch-based, app-based. You should also be able to report it via your TPAP, which is like your Google Pay, Phone Pay, etc. Today a lot of this is still possible, but there is significant diversity in terms of the abilities of all of these three to allow for this, right? Then we are imagining this CFRMS system which sits here, which in fact collects minimum viable information, which it gets fed here, but there is minimum viable information that gets shared into the existing databases, right? Sitting with the RBI, the NPCI, the Daksh, that is RBI, that there is a cyber, I won't get into all the details, but the point is, this is really an engine which should actually do risk triangulation as well as provide a graded response, right, in terms of what is the nature of enforcement or the action that needs to be taken. Yeah, so again, there are significant sort of features which are coming up over the past 10 months or so, which sort of embed some of these things. But really, and what I heard as of last week, there is some activity around having API-based methods through which the NPCI is in a way going to give real-time updates in terms of sort of suspected sort of transactions, etc., to the various platforms that are available. Not just TPAPs, but also e-commerce platforms, other digital platforms. So quickly going to compensation, right? So we heard about the UK experience where there is money that's going to be lost, that's going to be paid out to users if they have been defrauded. So the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which came out with this report in July 2023, said that we need an automatic compensation system to compensate the hapless victims out here, right? So we kind of thought about, okay, if we took this idea and we built on it to say what might a system look like, right? So I'll just very quickly say, one, we can't say that everybody should be equally compensated. We don't want a system where people are automatically eligible for compensation. But I'll just say, you as a user should exhibit that you're upholding certain caution standards. And I won't go into the caution standards, but the idea is to say, we also need to ensure that banks and TPAPs allow for the ability of users to uphold these caution standards, right? So it's not like banks can say, wash off, they can wash off responsibilities here. But rather to say, here is the responsibility for banks and TPAPs, and therefore here is the responsibility on users to uphold caution standards. But we need an exception. For users who are vulnerable users, and we don't get into defining what that is, they should be automatically allowed, automatically compensated. And then the next question is, who's going to kind of pay for this, right? Who should be compensated? Who should take on the compensation burden? And how do you ascertain liability? Like how do you split it among, say, issuer banks, acquirer banks, TPAPs, anybody else? So we actually put together a framework to say, what is a way to identify, right? Who are the bad actors? Who are the ones who are laggards? Who are the entities who aren't taking enough action, updating their systems, improving their systems? So they should actually take on more. They should actually take on the greater burden of the compensation. So anyway, so this is really the two big ideas. So call to action is anybody who's interested in helping us answer the tough questions around what are the constraints to design, what is the tech feature that is required, and how do we enable data sharing. Happy to speak offline.